everyone, and welcome to this side event, which has been organised by the Alliance of NGOs on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, of which I am chair, along with many other NGOs who have supported this event. We are very grateful to all the speakers and panelists who've joined us today, and especially those who've joined us to give the opening remarks. Ambassador Peter Burian, Permanent Representative of Slovakia and President of the UNTOC Conference of Parties, and Carlos Sanchez de la Aguila, Minister Councillor from the Permanent Mission of Peru and co-chair of the Group of Friends of Multi-Stakeholder Participation. Before I turn to them, I want to thank and also congratulate civil society partners for their inputs and participation in these current challenging times in many respects. Here at the CCPCJ, despite issues with resources, with traveling, we still see a very strong participation and a very strong program of side events featuring member states and civil society alike. So we thank you for your commitments. And this year, this is a bit of a strange CCPCJ in that we were supposed to be having this after the Crime Congress, but obviously the Crime Congress hasn't happened yet. But nonetheless, we still have important processes in which to input, including the Congress when it happens in September, and the UNTOC Conference of Parties and others that we'll go into today. And in fact, in the run-up to the 15th Crime Congress last year, more NGOs than ever participated in the preparatory process, and there are many, many written submissions that civil society have made to the outcome declaration. So we thank you for your commitment and your inputs. But even as the future of the Congress is uncertain, there are other challenges that face civil society in participating in multilateral process. For example, we've had closed processes of member states only on crimes that affect the environment and on access to justice, and the UNTOC constructive dialogues have been moved online in an already restricted process. So we look forward to hearing the remarks of the presidents of the COP today. So you will hear from a panel, some key actors from different and diverse civil society organizations. But first, I'm going to pass to Ambassador Burian to give some opening remarks, and we thank you, Excellency, for coming from the perspective as chair of the UNTOC Conference of Parties. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Jan. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and to be invited to address these very important side events on the priorities for civil society for the 15th United Nations Congress on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, and also what is particularly interesting for me to discuss also the priorities for 13th session of the Conference of the Parties of the Convention. And I wanted to commend the Alliance to convene this meeting, and especially as it was mentioned by Ian, this event takes place really at a very important and significant moment. And maybe it's good also that we combine the preparatory process for the Crime Congress and also for the COP13 session. And I'm pleased to also note since the very beginning that this process has demonstrated unprecedented levels of engagement by civil society organizations from across the globe. And as I see it, such participation reflects the growing recognition that effective responses to crime prevention and criminal justice challenges require a really inclusive dialogue and contributions from a broad range of stakeholders. And I personally believe that civil society, it's not a merely stakeholder to be consulted at the margins of some meetings and so on. It is a partner at the center of global crime prevention efforts, and your expertise, your proximity to affected communities, and your ability to innovate are essential to shaping the outcomes of the Crime Congress and the future direction of UNTOC as we are approaching the Conference of Parties, its 13th session, which will, as you know, convene in October 2026. And this conference, as you know, and as I expect, will provide an important opportunity for member states to review progress in the implementation of the convention and its protocols, address emerging challenges, and strengthen international cooperation against transnational organized crime. And as we prepare for COP13, it is essential that we preserve and build upon the progress achieved in recent years, including through the review mechanism for the implementation of UNTOC, and also that we also have all the ability to support the review mechanism, which has gradually developed into an important tool for promoting dialogue, identifying challenges, and sharing good practices among state parties. At the same time, the sustainability of this process will require continued attention and support, including financial funding. And as it was mentioned by Ian, we are indeed facing many challenges, including maintaining a normal communication through constructive dialogues with civil society, which I'm trying to find the support of member states and bridge the gap for really allowing you to come in person to these meetings and be part of these discussions in person, and also continue networking among yourselves. Discussions regarding the financing of the review mechanism, in my view, will be among the most important issues before member states in the lead up to COP13. It will be important to ensure adequate and sustainable funding so that the mechanism remains operational, effective, and capable of delivering on its mandate. And again, the progress achieved is still quite fragile, and we cannot allow to weaken the mechanisms for the review process to happen. The decision taken in this regard will have a direct impact on our collective ability to consolidate the progress achieved thus far and to further strengthen implementation of the convention. This is very important to mention. I'm also pleased to know that informal consultations via regional groups have recently been launched on a draft resolution aimed at facilitating and streamlining the participation of non-governmental organizations in the work of the conference of the parties and its subsidiary bodies. As you know, this was my pledge that after we failed to reach the decision at the COP11, COP12, and preceding COPs on this matter, I pledge that I will try to remove obstacles for reaching the decision and making the process more transparent, more predictable, and allow the civil society to be fully involved in many meetings. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Conference of the Parties has consistently recognized the valuable contribution of civil society through research, technical expertise, victim support, community engagement, and advocacy. Civil society organizations contribute perspectives and knowledge that complement the work of governments and international organizations. And your engagement can help strengthen implementation, enhance awareness of emerging trends, and support more effective responses to the evolving threats posed by organized crime. But this understanding needs to be, as I mentioned earlier, translated into concrete action, concrete steps, including appropriate, adequate funding. The adoption of the first civil society declaration on the more effective implementation of UNTOC marked an important milestone in advancing dialogue between civil society and the intergovernmental process. And as we look towards COP13, it is important to continue fostering constructive engagement and identifying practical ways to support the effective implementation of the convention. So I believe today's event offers a valuable opportunity to hear directly from you, from civil society representatives working across a wide range of thematic areas and regions, and your recommendations and experience can help, I'm sure, inform ongoing discussions related to both the Crime Congress and the future work of the Conference of the Parties. And I encourage you, all participants, to engage actively in this discussion and to continue building partnerships that advance our shared objectives, strengthening international cooperation and promoting effective implementation of UNTOC in order to prevent and combat transnational organized crime in all its forms. So I am eager also to listen to you and reflect the discussions which will be happening today, but also during the week of meetings of CCPCJ. And hopefully also your inputs will allow me and give me more arguments to work with member states to convince that investment in participation of civil society and also funding existing and maybe building new mechanisms for dialogue, including not allowing constructive dialogues to move to online platform, that basically I will be able to pass this agenda in a coherent and also clear manner to my successor, the future president of COP13. So once again, thank you for your attention.
And next, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us today and for those words and the efforts you're putting into getting the process moving forward towards COP13. I will now ask Carlos Sanchez de la Aguila, Minister Councillor from the Permanent Mission of Peru, as the co-chair of the Group of Friends of Multi-Stakeholder Participation in UNODC Matters, to give us some additional opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Ian. Excellencies, Ambassador Peter Burian, Permanent Representative of Slovakia and President of the COP, Ambassador Karl Hallergard, Permanent Representative from the European Union. Thank you very much for joining us in this important event. Distinguished colleagues, and especially a representative from civil society organizations. It is my pleasure to join you today at this important, very important side event dedicated to identifying civil society priorities for the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice that we are holding this week, the 15th United Nations Crime Congress, and the 13th Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, and the broader international crime prevention and criminal justice agenda. I would like first to thank the Alliance of NGOs on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, the UNOCC Civil Society Unit, and all co-organizing organizations for bringing together such a diverse and committed group of stakeholders. The breadth of participation reflected in this initiative is itself an evidence of growing global recognition that the fight against transnational organized crime cannot be won by governments alone. Today, organized criminal groups are increasingly adaptive, transnational, and technologically sophisticated. They exploit governance gaps, corruption, inequalities, and conflicts. Their activities fuel violence, undermine sustainable development, weaken institutions, and threaten the security and well-being of communities around the world. Whether we are addressing trafficking in persons, crimes that affect the environment, illicit trafficking of drugs, firearms, migrants, wildlife, or the growing convergence of criminal markets or cybercrime, the challenge requires a whole-of-society response. Civil society organizations are indispensable partners in these efforts for member states. They are often the first to identify emerging threats, the closest to the affected communities, and trusted actors supporting victims and vulnerable populations. They generate valuable evidence, provide specialized expertise, monitor implementation gaps, raise public awareness, and help ensure that crime prevention and criminal justice policies remain people-centered and grounded in human rights. The United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime provides a framework for international cooperation among states, yet effective implementation requires a strong partnership beyond governments. Civil society contributes to prevention, support resilience at the community level, and strengthens accountability. It also helps us understand the human impact of organized crime and ensure that the voices of the victims are heard in policy discussions. As we look ahead to the Crime Congress and the next conference of the parties to UNTOC, we should continue creating meaningful opportunities for civil society engagement. The recommendations, experience, and field-based knowledge can enrich our collective efforts and help translate international commitments into tangible results on the ground. Let us therefore view civil society not merely as observers of multilateral processes, but as strategic partners in building safer, more just, and more resilient societies. By strengthening cooperation between states, international organizations, academia, private sector, and civil society, we can enhance our collective capacity to prevent and combat transnational organized crimes and its illicit economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for those great words. And we're going to move straight into the panel now, and I'll just introduce them quickly. Ana Montemayor is currently a policy advisor at the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime and executive officer at the International Council of Environmental Law. She will talk about crimes that affect the environment. Next, we will move on to access to justice with Leah Conklin, Director of Advocacy and Communications at the International Legal Foundation. Next, we will go into journalism and community action with Marlene Leon Fontes from the representative Iniciativa Sinaloa, a Mexican civil society organization. And last, Dr. Jose Armando from Medical Impact, which is looking at the nexus between health and criminal justice. And we're very interested to hear those remarks. So first, I will ask Anna to give her remarks on what the priorities are on crimes that affect the environment.
Thank you very much, Ian. And good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, fellow panelists, and participants joining us here today. It is a great pleasure to be joining you here. And I would like to first take a moment to thank the Alliance and the UNODC Civil Society Unit for convening this discussion and for inviting me to share the priorities for action in relation to crimes that affect the environment. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Initiative to End Wildlife Crime, as well as the International Council of Environmental Law, as well as civil society partners working on this issue, including the Alliance's Working Group on Crimes that Affect the Environment. Crimes that affect the environment, as we all know, have seen sustained attention at the UN Crime Fora in the last few years, including from civil society organizations. We have seen an increased number of side events held on crimes that affect the environment generally, but also in relation to specific crime types, which can be wildlife trafficking, illegal mining, illegal deforestation, or illegal fishing, among others. At this week's session of the CCPCJ, there are 10 side events explicitly focusing on crimes that affect the environment or a specific subtype of crime. And at the upcoming Crime Congress, we expect to see no less than 20 ancillary events on this topic, as well as a high-level special event as part of the main program. And at the UNTOC COP in October later this year, we expect a resolution to be tabled that establishes a negotiation process for a new protocol or protocol to the UNTOC on crimes that affect the environment. This development builds upon years of active participation and advocacy work from supporting states, including Peru, Brazil, France, Angola, and Gabon, among others, as well as several civil society organizations and other initiatives that have advocated and advanced a potential protocol as an appropriate response to the gaps in the international legal framework to prevent and combat crimes that affect the environment. While these developments show that there is clearly a lot of interest in taking action to prevent and combat these crimes, these are still surprisingly categorized as new and emerging crimes as part of these forums. As such, they're often not included in the main agendas, but rather kept as sideline events, largely hosted and led by civil society organizations. This also reflects the reality on the ground by many domestic law enforcement systems, which is to have lower priority and lower resources allocated and low levels of law enforcement mandates to effectively combat these crimes. But despite this, 2026 has been a particularly busy year on the international agenda in relation to crimes that affect the environment, and the rest of the year will provide what we consider the best opportunity in decades to make significant progress in taking concerted action to combat these crimes. And in terms of specific and concrete priorities, the Crime Congress in Abu Dhabi will help set global priorities on the crime agenda for the next 5 years. So for this Congress, the states will have a really excellent opportunity to really firmly embed and show that crimes that affect the environment are no longer emerging crimes, that they should be included and embedded within the main UN agenda. And in that regard, the Abu Dhabi Declaration that is still being negotiated, it should really include stronger commitments from states in relation to crimes that affect the environment compared to what is currently reflected in the latest draft. In particular, when you consider that the theme of the Crime Congress is crime prevention and criminal justice to protect people and planet. So this will, including stronger commitments and real concrete commitments in the declaration, it should be a clear and unequivocal opportunity for states to declare that crimes that affect the environment will be a policy and an enforcement priority for the next 5 years, and not just something that is something that they consider or endeavor to do. Then at the UNTOC COP later this year, states should support a resolution opening up or establishing an ad hoc committee to begin negotiations on a potential protocol to the UNTOC on crimes that affect the environment. The negotiation should aim for an ambitious scope that includes as many environmental crimes as possible, but no least the crimes that are covered by the UNODC, and among others, their global analysis on crimes affecting the environment, so including at least wildlife, which in itself has as its scope all species of wild fauna, flora, and fungi, as well as minerals and precious metals, and waste and pollution crimes. Participation from civil society should also be ensured, and in particular, the voices of indigenous peoples and local communities, as these are often the ones at the front lines of crimes of the crimes that are being committed, and can provide both the best and most tangible information about how these crimes are being committed, as well as bearing the largest brunt of their effects. A protocol would firmly cement crimes that affect the environment where they belong, which is within the UNODC, and the Vienna Duty Station is being in charge of its implementation and overseeing its a translation into work on the ground. It would also provide a clear and centralized hub where we can track progress and facilitate coordinated action, as the UNODC and this forum already has the expertise through tackling other transnational organized crimes. With the protocol, states could close persistent gaps in the international legal framework that criminals continue to exploit and which are continuing to cause unaccountable damage to the environment as ecosystems and habitats. A protocol could help harmonize legal approaches. It would strengthen international cooperation. It would encourage the use of advanced law enforcement tools and support and facilitate financial investigations and asset recovery. In terms of civil society action and how civil society can continue to support these important efforts, it will be important to continue increasing visibility to this issue, which is something that we're already seeing now with the busy agenda of side events and other statements and general participation from civil society. But in specific terms, organizations can help encourage states to support the resolution at the UNTOC COP later this year. And in particular, states that do not have permanent missions here in Vienna. So it will be very important to encourage the largest participation possible later at the UNTOC COP here in Vienna. Another way to contribute would be to continue sharing expertise, and that's in particular for those that have first-hand accounts, evidence, and intelligence on the ground, to share the real-life example of how these crimes are transnational, how they're organized, and the problem that can better be tackled through the adoption and development of a protocol. And to conclude, we must seize this opportunity that this year continues to present and build all the momentum that states and civil society have been building on for the past few years. The devastating impacts of crimes that affect the environment transcend national boundaries and even generations. We must ensure that decisive action is taken now before our biodiversity and our ecosystems are destroyed beyond repair. I thank you for now, and I look forward to continuing the discussion later.
Thank you very much, Anna. And now we're going to change topic and move to access to justice. And I'll ask Leah Conklin to give her thoughts.
Thanks so much, Ian. I'm grateful for the opportunity to join this esteemed panel and to share perspectives from civil society. And I'd like to thank the Alliance and the UNODC Civil Society Unit and all of the co-sponsors for creating this space. And as mentioned, I represent the International Legal Foundation, which over the past 20 years has represented more than 10,000 people in conflict with the law across 3 continents. The ILF also co-chairs the Alliance's working group on access to justice, along with Penal Reform International, and we're members of the Campaign to Decriminalize Poverty and Status, which is a coalition of nearly 100 organizations around the world working to end discrimination in criminal justice systems. So I come here today with perspectives gained through this work with these multiple groups. And I want to start by acknowledging the progress this commission has made on access to justice and why that progress matters so much for what comes next. If you trace the arc of declarations and resolutions coming out of this body over the past 15 years, you can see a very meaningful shift towards access to justice. For example, in 2012, the adoption of the UN Principles and Guidelines on Access to Legal Aid in Criminal Justice Systems was the first international instrument dedicated to legal aid and framing legal aid as a right essential to any fair justice system. Later, the Doha Declaration and the Kyoto Declaration both make explicit commitments to people-centered approaches to justice and to eliminating discrimination within criminal justice systems. And in 2023, the resolution on equal access to justice, the first resolution specifically dedicated to this topic, urges member states toward concrete action toward accessible and non-discriminatory justice systems. This resolution also called for UNODC to convene an expert group meeting on equal access to justice, which was held in Brasilia in 2014. It brought together governments, civil society, and very importantly, people with lived experience, and produced a concrete people-centered set of recommendations to turn the Equal Access to Justice resolution into action. I mention these because this progress is the result of sustained engagement by member states, civil society, independent experts, and people with lived experience showing up, drafting language, and building consensus over many years. That is what this body can achieve when it works inclusively and with purpose. And it is in that spirit that I want to lift up 4 key priorities for the work of the CCPCJ. And the first is to keep access to justice on the agenda. Access to justice is a very broad topic, and it means a lot to a lot of different people. It's very inclusive of many issues. But in particular, I want to highlight the rights and treatment of people in conflict with the law, who are often the most marginalized in our communities and who are very directly impacted by decisions made in the CCPCJ. In particular, issues which are foundational to all other rights are access to legal aid in line with the UN principles and guidelines, and addressing and eliminating discrimination that exists in every single criminal justice system around the world. Keeping these issues visible and on the agenda in the Commission's sessions, in the Crime Congress, and in the Abu Dhabi Declaration is essential. We have strong previously agreed language on access to justice, including on legal aid and non-discrimination and equity. And most urgently, we are concerned that this existing language is not reflected in the current draft of the Abu Dhabi Declaration, and we risk serious backsliding. Negotiations are no doubt challenging, and we're grateful for all of the work going into this declaration. And it is our hope that member states will not only continue championing access to justice, but will draw a hard line, requiring inclusion of this hard-won progress in a document that will guide this body's work for the next 5 years. The second is to further integrate access to justice priorities. So building on this need to keep it on the agenda, there's also a need to combine forces a bit. Access to justice considerations should be woven into the Commission's work across thematic areas, not treated as a standalone item as we often end up in silos. Though the past 2 decades fortunately have seen progress in access to justice integration, earlier resolutions, declarations, and agendas largely reflect an unbalanced scale toward enforcement and tough-on-crime narratives, which has in part played a role to the multiple justice crises that we now are working to undo, including millions of people around the world arrested, detained, and prosecuted without ever speaking to a lawyer, overcrowded detention centers with many people in detention awaiting trial, victims of trafficking and other forms of violence prosecuted instead of protected, and criminal justice systems disproportionately impacting marginalized populations, people whose contact with the system stems directly from poverty and exclusion. Our conversations in this space are often siloed between enforcement and access to justice, but true justice requires both. It means asking across all thematic areas and discussions how access to justice considerations can be integrated. When we discuss important topics like enforcement of drug policy, counterterrorism, or organized crime, we should ask who is being arrested and prosecuted, who might be unintentionally impacted in implementation. Are we prioritizing access to legal representation? And are the most marginalized populations being protected or further harmed? Access to justice is not a standalone issue. It is central to the mandate of the CCPCJ. It is essential to community safety, especially of those most marginalized, and it is essential to rule of law. Third, I'd like to see us continue to deepen engagement with civil society and people with lived experience. And to support what the ambassador has said about creating structures for engagement, the International Legal Foundation was in the room when the UN principles and guidelines on access to legal aid were developed. Civil society and government experts sat together to produce that instrument, and it has been since cited in domestic legislation, court decisions, and policy reforms around the world. The same is true of the expert meeting on equal access to justice held in Brasilia, government and civil society experts, people with lived experience, together produced concrete and actionable recommendations rooted in realities of on-the-ground experience. Key to these efforts were civil society and government working side by side, not in separate consultations, having structured, meaningful engagement in the development of key documents, and the participation of civil society in main agendas of our gatherings together is key to impact. In an environment where in many countries civil society is facing significant pressures and restrictions, protecting space for independent voices in forums like this one is all the more important. And I do want to acknowledge the Alliance and the UNODC Civil Society Unit, as well as many member states, including the work of the ambassador that is mentioned, for their work and commitment to this initiative. And lastly, this point is focused on action. And I think we all know that progress on access to justice requires more than language and declarations. It requires purposeful commitments and sustained action. We must identify concrete actions and clear frameworks for implementation on the access to justice discussion here in Vienna. And civil society stands ready to partner in that work and can be a very active participant and partner to get these things and make them realities on the ground. So thank you again to the Alliance and supporters.
Thank you very much, Leah. And just to respond very quickly to both Leah and Anna's presentations, we've heard very specific examples of how civil society is working with the development of norms and even legal instruments as well, which is really interesting to hear and really demonstrates what we're talking about. We're going to go down to the community level now with Marlene Leon to speak about her experiences working to support journalism and working across different sectors of society in the community where she's from. So, Marlene.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks to the Alliance and the United Nations for this space. My name is Marlene Leon. I'm from Sinaloa, in the northwest of Mexico. I represent a NGO, Iniciativa Sinaloa, who's working on transparency, accountability, human rights, freedom of expression, and community resilience. Today, I would like to share a perspective from a territory that has long been associated with organized crime, but where communities continue to resist, organize, and work toward peace. Too often, discussions about organized crime focus primarily on illicit markets, trafficking routes, seizures, arrests, and criminal networks. These issues are important, but from the perspective of affected communities, organized crime is experienced differently. It is experienced through fear, displacement, violence, loss, and the gradual erosion of the trust in public institutions. In Sinaloa, we are currently living through one of the most difficult periods in recent years. Since the outbreak of violence on September 9, 2024, because the war of two organized crime, communities have faced persistent insecurity and profound social impacts. The consequences have been particularly devastating for children and young people. Journalists and civil society organizations have documented growing concerns regarding the forced recruitment of minors by criminal groups. At the same time, the violence has claimed the lives of more than 100 children and adolescents. Behind every statistic is a story, a family, and a future that has been taken away. These realities remind us that organized crime doesn't operate solely through illicit economies. It also exploits vulnerable population, undermines social cohesion, and weakens the condition necessary for communities to thrive. This is why I would like to emphasize a priority that is often overlooked in international discussion on organized crime: transparency. Transparency and accountability are not secondary governance issues. They are essential tools for prevention, protection, and justice. We cannot effectively address what we cannot measure. We cannot evaluate policies if information is inaccessible. We cannot identify patterns of abuse if data remain hidden, and we cannot build public trust when the institution operates without accountability. From our work in Sinaloa, we have learned that opacity creates fertility ground for impunity. When information is unavailable, citizens lose the ability to understand the true scope of violence, evaluate government's response, or demand corrective actions. The impact of organized crime extends beyond physical violence. It can also silence information. Research conducted by organization Iniciativa Sinaloa found that nearly half of the territory of our state is experiencing condition of information silence, where violence and criminal control have severely restricted journalists and citizens' access to information. For this reason, strengthening resilience requires more than law enforcement response. It also requires strengthening democratic democratic institutions, protecting civic space, and ensuring meaningful participation by civil society. As a discussion continues with the CCPCJ and the Crime Congress and the implementation of the United Nations Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, I would like to offer 3 recommendations. First, place affected communities at the center of the policy discussions. Success should not be measured by only operational outcomes, but also by safety, well-being, and resilience of communities. Second, strength transparency, access to information, and public accountability as integral components of organized crime prevention strategies. These are not separate agendas, they are mutually reinforcing, and they ensure meaningful participation of civil society in implementation and review mechanisms. Example like this allow that we can promote through civil society 2 years ago, like a goal from our work. So in a space controlled by the organized crime. This law is to protect and to promote the human rights of journalists and human defenders. So finally, communities cannot build resilience in the dark. Transparency is not only a governance principle, it's a tool to protect children, strain the truth, prevent violence, and uphold the rule of the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlena, for those perspectives, which are very useful for us here. I think everyone agrees. And for the final panelist, I will go to Jose Armando, Medical Impact.
Thank you. Her Excellence here and His Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues. Thank you for the space for the civil society, the Alliance of NGOs of Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, and the member states. Today, I talk on behalf of Medical Impact, our Executive Director, Dr. Giorgio Frangiuti, and a great team of people who works to give healthcare in different contexts. I want to share with you our experience in different regions around the world and the value of the cooperation with different actors to build health, care, peace, and justice. Medical Impact is a non-governmental, non-profit organization delivering humanitarian medical assistance to populations with living in extreme marginalization, hard-to-reach settings, and post-disaster contexts across multiple countries like Mexico, Colombia, and Sierra Leone. Alongside clinical care, we conduct applied research and engage in health diplomacy, advocating before parliamentarians, heads of states, and international community to translate frontline medical evidence into policy. Crime is transboundary, organized, and increasingly complex, intersecting with social, economic, environmental, and technological systems, a reality already recognized in the Kyoto Declaration adopted in the 14th United Nations Congress of Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice 2021. And from a medical and public health perspective, the disruption of peace by organized crime must also be recognized as social determinant of health, directly affecting morbidity, mental health, environmental integrity, and trust in institutions. This absence of public trust perpetuates social injustice and allows organized crime to exploit in existing vulnerabilities, including limited access to healthcare. Ending violence in this context, therefore, remains a precise challenge that requires a strained intersectoral cooperation among governments, civil society, and international partners in territories where the governance is weakened by crime and violence. Healthcare NGOs are peace builders. They often constitute a primary entry point for healing harmed social tissue, acting trusted humanitarian actors with the communities and the margin of peace and the institutional legitimacy of the rule of law. Health services reduce grievance, and community and family medicine enhance local dialogue on education, environment, and labor, and strengthen social cohesion. When delivered from a people-centered perspective, both health and justice can move away from purely punitive paradigms, such as hygienics and prosecution, and they contribute to build a culture of peace while addressing the structural determinants of violence through a preventive and harm reduction rationale. At the CCPCJ, we can draw a lesson of the Global Commission of HIV and the Law, whose 2012 report, the HIV and the Law, Risk, Rights, and Health, demonstrate the value and non-punitive approaches in rebuild trust and containing the spread of HIV pandemic. This model of people-centered intervention is equally applicable to non-communicable disease and to another pandemics. This pandemic is violence. Violence is itself a social pandemic, and as the Johns Hopkins Center for Humanitarian Health, Lancet Commission of Health, Conflict, and Forced Displacement set out in his reports, in a World Crisis and Impunity present during the 79th World Health Assembly last week, the scientific evidence shows that without peace, there is not health, and without health, there is not peace. Our organization can echo and confirm these findings. We have lived this reality every day for past 10 years in training communities across Latin America and Africa. As a personal lesson, now supported by scientific evidence, we make a call to you. Let us of thinking of peace building in the local level as the vaccines that prevents outbreaks violence, and harm reduction and preventing policies at the biosocial level are continuous treatments that make society more resilient. This will only possible through transparency, accessibility, and the co-creation policies with the communities. All essential to countering disinformation and prohibition policies that perpetuate cycles of violence. Medical Impact reaffirms its commitment to support UNODC, member states, and partner NGOs in advancing people-centered health and science-informed approaches to peace building and crime prevention. Thank you for the Alliance, the UNODC civil society, and the supporters.
Well, thank you very much, Jose. And I think in a short time, we've been through a lot of policy areas and been given a lot of recommendations. And we will be taking these issues forward and it'd be great if you can share your remarks with us, all the panelists, and we will be able to disseminate them. We do have some time. We started a bit late, so I think we can go a few minutes over. We do have some time for questions before we go to closing remarks, but only very brief comments and questions. So I will open the floor. Ambassador Cvekic.
Thank you very much. Excellent idea. And we heard several important priorities. So I can only add one. And the list of priorities, of course, always becoming longer and longer. What I wanted to say is that talking about the Congress, the UN Congress started as the Congress on Crime Prevention and the Treatment of Offenders, which is okay. Crime prevention is, of course, before crime. And then those that have done harm have to be dealt with. So it was treatment of offenders. Then we moved to Congress of Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, which is, of course, fine. What police and prosecutors and justice and prisons do again with those that have done harm. This is all before and during the crime. But we are not dealing well with what after the crime. And that after the crime is I think, the most important issue, and that is the victims of crime. And victims of crime have been marginalized. I want to remind you that 41 years ago, during the UN Congress on Crime Prevention and Treatment of Offenders in Milan, 1985, the Declaration on the Rights of the Victims of Crime and Abuse of Power was adopted. 41 years have passed. Crimes have changed. At that time, we didn't have organized crime, we didn't have organized corruption, we didn't have cybercrime, and victims have changed in the meantime, as well as offenders. But somehow this issue of victims have not been updated and did not enter into the mainstream of our discussions today. This regards Congress, this regards, Mr. Ambassador, also the Conference of the State Parties of Organized Victims of Organized Crime, and also of the corruption and cybercrime. So my plea is actually to bring back to the main agenda and policy discussions of CCPCJ, Congress, UNTOC and UNCAC conferences of state parties, and of the cybercrime. There will be another conference, I hope, of state parties, the issue of victims, updated from these new perspectives, because we have to protect victims. That is why we have criminal justice system. That's the main issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ugi, and thank you for all the work that you've done to promote this agenda, which the Alliance has worked with you on as well. We look forward to doing more. We have time for one or two more comments or questions. Sir.
Sorry for try to save the time. I am thank you and thank unit of United Nations and all person organize this site event. It's for us. It's very nice to develop our idea and our experience. For me, I am Abdelgawad Ahmed from Egypt. I'm president NGO, Arab Council supporting fair trial and human rights. All time I am trying to find a new idea to how to useful. For me, I think why we don't. I hope to find a way to extension our experience for our target, our subject, because every NGO here have experience, have many story success for the same or part of our target. So I hope I ask it you and ask it all to try to find a way to not when we have a meeting and site event. No, we need a way door open all time to extension our experience, to make collection, to find, to to success to stop our challenge for NGO. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very much taken on board. And I think the alliance, with the resources that it has, tries its best. But we always trying to do more to bridge the gap between the member states and the civil society, and to bring the perspectives both ways, actually, and to make it more normal, I guess, for us to be talking together in these in this way. Okay, I think we can close now and go straight to Mirella for some closing remarks from the UNODC Civil Society Unit. Sorry that you're sitting over there, but
thank you. Thank you for the Alliance for organizing this meeting, which allowed us to hear some of the priorities from NGOs. So to start with this week, a very important session with over 600 NGO representatives registered, and a lot of many sides event. And we heard from the different NGO speakers on issues they consider their priority: environmental crime, legal aid, health as also a key for building peace. It is essential from what we heard, that because criminals are very well connected and organized, to have also strong network among the NGO community. And we thank the leadership of Ambassador Burian, that will bring us in October to the conference of the party, a very important meeting. And before that, the Crime Congress, which hopefully will take place in end of September, beginning of October. So there will be possibility to continue to network, to build on this important discussion and issues. And from the civil society unit perspective, we are here to help you go through this journey. So thanks again, and I think I will stop here. We have reached the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mirella. And I want to thank all the panelists, all the co-organizers again, and urge you to take forward what you've heard and your responses in your discussions with member states and with others, and see these priorities translated into action. Thank you very much.